Lila Rose. Lila is the founder of Live Action Videos, a pro-life movement that is extremely active and really shaking up the established Planned Parenthood organization. Lila.
Okay, can everybody hear me? Yeah. Okay, great. How's everybody doing? Good. Good. I hear you've been sitting here for a while in the sun, which, by the way, I hear also is a rare thing in Massachusetts. That it's warm, so we should be thankful. I'm just coming from 65-degree weather in Los Angeles. You can actually lie out on the beach and just totally relax. So it's nice here, but not as nice as there. Not to rub it in or anything. But last year, during the spring, so a beautiful time in LA, and I'm a student in Los Angeles at UCLA. I'm a full-time student, I'm finishing up this year. But last year, I was speaking at this church, and in the middle of my talk, I was giving a pro-life speech, and in the middle of my talk, this woman walks into the room. She's this tall, thin, blonde woman, looks very LA, and she's holding a small dog. So it's like, you know, Paris Hilton walks in, and I'm like, is it a celebrity? But it wasn't. She was this woman, and she leans against the back wall, and she just looks at me with these eyes like she doesn't like what I'm saying. And she starts tapping on her hand, like, when is this girl going to finish her talk? And I was thinking during my talk, who is this woman? You know, I wonder if maybe she's having a bad day. Well, after I was finished, she walked right up to me, and she shook my hand, and she introduced herself as a member of the board of Planned Parenthood Federal, the federal Planned Parenthood organization. And when she said that, I said, oh, well, nice to meet you. Pleasure to meet you. And she said, you know, I just had to come by your talk because I heard you be here, and I needed to give you some advice as a mom. Funny that she would say, as a mom, when she's advocating for the very violence that denies mothers their motherhood. But this is her advice. She said, young lady, I think you have a bright future in front of you, but you have to stop saying pro-abortion. You have to say pro-choice. And I said, well, why? Why is that? What's so wrong with saying pro-abortion? What's so wrong with abortion? And she said, it's a very difficult decision, that's why. And I said, well, why is abortion a difficult decision? And she said, well, it's just a personal choice, that's why. You just say pro-choice, it's about choice. And I said, but why is abortion a difficult choice? What's so difficult and personal about it? And we went in circles a few times, and soon I realized that she would never answer my question, what's so wrong with abortion? Because if this board member of Planned Parenthood National answered the question, she would be looking head-on her whole life's contradiction. That while she's advocating for women and for the rights of women and for reproductive freedom, she's advocating for the killing of millions of tiny little women in the womb every year, and millions of tiny little men. I pray for that woman and for the many others like her, that one day she'll realize what she's a part of. She'll realize what she's doing. She'll see the truth. She'll let it devastate her. And that way she can heal and she can join our side. That was not the first time that I interacted with Planned Parenthood, our country's biggest abortion chain. They've really cornered the market on abortion. They do more abortions than any other business or organization, about 300,000 every year. And when I first interacted with them, it was doing an undercover investigation. I was a college freshman at the time, almost 4 years ago. It was another spring day in Los Angeles, and I had been reading reports. I had been doing some research with pro-life activists, the things that go on inside abortion clinics. And I wanted to find out, is it happening in abortion clinics near me? And if it is there a way to get it on film? Is there a way to capture it so I can spread the truth to other people? And in particular, I had read about a report by a man named Mark Crutcher of Life Dynamics, who found that out of over 800 Planned Parenthood clinics that were surveyed, 91% of them covered up the abuse, the sexual abuse of underage girls. So I wonder, well, what about the underage girls in LA, of which there are many, who are preyed upon? What happens to them? So just 5 miles from my college dormitory is a Planned Parenthood clinic. And this clinic is on Santa Monica 3rd Street Promenade. It's this beautiful area that goes right up to the beach. There's all of the shops and restaurants. So you can go shopping, and on the second floor above a coffee shop is a surgical abortion center. So on this beautiful spring day, when women are buying dresses and having lunch, there are women upstairs in this abortion center waiting for their abortion appointments. So dressed as a 15-year-old girl, took off the high heels, put on an old Hannah Montana shirt, I went up into that elevator to that waiting room to the clinic to go and see what they would tell me as an underage girl. And I remember stepping off the elevator and looking through the glass doors into the waiting room and being stunned, looking at all these women clustered in the waiting room and thinking that when I was looking at these women and they were looking sad or looking upset, reading magazines, one of them looked like she was going to cry or she was crying. And I remember thinking that when I was looking at these women, I wasn't just looking at one life, one person, but I was looking at two. And on that day, in that clinic, one of those lives would be violently destroyed. And on the wall of the clinic, it said Esperanza, or hope in Spanish. And I remember thinking, this must be the most hopeless place in all of Los Angeles. But I buzzed into the waiting room because I saw, oh, a young girl, maybe she's another person that'll take an abortion. They buzzed me in, I walked up to the front desk and I said, you know, I'm 15, can I talk to somebody? And then they must have known what was up because immediately the clinician took me behind the counter and she said, okay, what's going on? And I said, well, you know, I'm 15 and, you know, he's 23. What do I do? In California, that's a textbook case of statutory rape. And they're required by the California law, like many other states, to report it immediately to the police or Child Protective Services. But this is the first piece of advice I got in an abortion clinic. Just figure out a birth date that works. Lie on the paperwork. Say that you're older than you really are. No one will know about the abortion. No one will know about your relationship. That was my first bit of advice. That same day, after being told to lie and to break the law, and after not having the abuse reported, no follow-up questions were asked by the personnel at this clinic, I went to another clinic. At the second clinic in Los Angeles, the second investigation I ever did, I was sat down by the manager. And not only did she not care that I was 15 with a 23-year-old man who could be my soccer coach or could be my teacher, but she went on to give me her advice. And this was a typical counseling advice given to women in Planned Parenthood clinics, and we would hear it again in other clinics. This is what they tell women considering abortion, including in girls. She said, you know what, honey, when I was 17, I got pregnant. And I said, really, you did? Well, what did you do? And she said, you know what, it was really difficult, but you know, I had my baby. And I remember thinking, oh my gosh, she's undercover too. She's an undercover girl like that. And we're here in this clinic, and we should know what's going on. And I was like, really, you had your baby? And she said, yeah, I did. And I said, well, do you regret it? And she said, you know, it was very difficult. And you know what? If I could do it again, I would do it very differently. If I could do it again, I would not continue the pregnancy. And my son is 16 now. That was the advice in that Planned Parenthood clinic. Since then, as you may imagine, we've been into dozens of clinics across the country to continue to get this on tape because people don't believe it if you just say it. Get it on tape so that we can show an unknowing and unsuspecting public about the illegal, the manipulative, the misinformation, all of this activity that's happening in these clinics. And they've certainly caught on to our investigations. I guess you could say that I'm flattered when I walk into Planned Parenthood clinics to see my picture on the wall. That's because to Planned Parenthood, I am a known anti-choice extremist. But I think I'm in good company today because here we are all extremists for the best cause that our nation has today, the cause for the most innocent and the most defenseless. One summer, just recently, I bleached my hair platinum blonde to continue going undercover because they recognized me as a brunette. So we were just in the clinic recently, and now they have the brunette picture up and the blonde picture up. So they're catching on. I'm thinking of going red next. But if anybody has any ideas, the good news is I get to work with, I am privileged to work with an amazing and growing team of other talented young people across the country that say, you know what? I still be a high school or college student. I still have my professional work to take care of, but I see that this is the greatest human rights abuse, and I want to be a part. I want to be a part and lend my time and lend my talent and stick with it and make a difference. And so there are other people that we train to continue to do the undercover work, and so they never know who's coming next. They never know what's going to happen next, what's going to show up in the media the next day, which is good because we want to keep evil on their toes. We want to continue to expose this injustice. After all, why are we all here today? Why do we even bother to do this investigative work? Yes, we're pro-life, but why are we so pro-life? Abortion kills babies, right? Why is this so significant? Because there is no greater, is there a greater, shedding of innocent blood in the world today than abortion? Show me a cause where more lives are being taken And I will drop the pro-life issue and I'll go fight something else. We'll go fight something else. But here's the blood in our country and in our world today, in our addiction to allowing and our addiction to abortion as an answer, as a solution to problems, to killing the most innocent and the most defenseless among us. The reason that laws exist, like the right to life is protected by laws to protect against murder, is because weak people need to be protected from strong people. Laws are for the weak. They're for people that can't take care of themselves. But when a nation's laws turn against the weakest in our country, that are so weak they can't even speak, they can hardly move outside, they can't move outside their mother, then at the very center of our laws is injustice. Because the strong are taking advantage of the weak. And that's why this is the cause for us to be a part of. This is the cause for us to fight. When I was 9 years old, I first became aware of abortion. I was in my living room, I was a nerd, I was constantly reading. I was the kind of nerd where I would sit at the dinner table with a book, and my dad would put it on top of the refrigerator during dinner, so because I wasn't allowed to read and eat at the same time, which makes sense because it was probably a bore to sit with me. But I was looking for a book to read when I was 9, and I found this book called A Handbook About Abortion by Dr. and Mrs. Wilkie, who are great patriots and founders of the pro-life movement. Very elderly now, but this book was very instrumental in teaching a lot of people about abortion. Anyways, I opened the book up, I'm 9 years old, it fell to the middle, where there are images. And what I was looking at shocked me, and I quickly closed the book and I pushed it away. And then in curiosity, I brought the book back and I opened it up and I looked. And what I was looking at was the image of a tiny child that had been the victim of abortion. Maybe 10 weeks old, with little hands, little arms, little legs. And I remember thinking, at 9 years old, how could anybody do that to a baby? Is this real? Is this really happening? Can this be legal? Though I didn't have a full sense of what that meant, but can this be allowed? I'll never forget that image. And many of the activists I work with, they say, it was the image of the victim, the image of abortion that spurred me to action, that told me in my heart, I have to get involved, I have to do something. In 1955, there was this little boy, 14 years old, named Emmett Till. And Emmett was visiting his uncle and his cousins. He was black. He was visiting his uncles and his cousins in the deep south just for a fun visit for a few days. And when he was there, he was coming to a very segregated, racist part of the deep south. And he was from the north where racism wasn't so bad. It wasn't so enforced. There wasn't enforced legal racism, you could say. And he was playing with his cousins outside a convenience store. And he was accused of whistling at a white woman, this 14-year-old boy. And word spread around the town, gossip spread around the town, and a few days later, in the middle of the night, Emmett was kidnapped from his uncle's house, and he was taken to the rural countryside by a band of white men, by basically, it could have been KKK Klansmen. He was taken in the middle of this rural countryside, and there they beat Emmett to death. Even though he was only 14, they showed him no mercy. They pushed an eye out of his head, pushed his nose up into his head, cracked open his skull, they whipped him, and they shot him through the head, and then they left him to die in a creek. When Emmett's mother found out about this, because they found this body, he was missing, and they sent out search parties, and they found this body beaten beyond recognition. They recognized it was Emmett because he had his father's ring on his hand, which was very individual to his father. And when his mother found out about this, she demanded the body of her son. She was distraught. Mrs. Till said, send me my son's body so I can give him a proper burial. And the coroner said, okay, we're sending you the casket, but we're nailing it shut, and do not open it, because he's disfigured, just bury him. But when Mrs. Till's mother got the coffin of her son, she opened it and she looked at her son, disfigured beyond recognition. And then she decided to hold a public funeral. And Mrs. Till decided to invite the media, photojournalists, the public, anybody who wanted to come could come to this funeral. And she decided to leave the coffin open. And people were very upset with her when she told them her plans. They said, Mrs. Till, this is disrespectful to your son's body. This is disrespectful to the dead. Don't leave the casket open. Don't do this. And others said, don't do it, Mrs. Till, because you're going to incite violence. People are going to get mad, and they're going to go kill other people because of doing this, because you're doing this. But Mrs. Till said, I want the whole world to see what is happening to my little Emmett, what happened to my little Emmett. And likewise, we want the whole world to see what is happening to those little babies. Because if they don't see it, many of them will